Thank you, good gentleman. Good gentleman from 4.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To debate in favor of the bill.
Has the floor.
Thank you, sir. I think we have to take a step back and ask ourselves, why are we here discussing this? And I think the answer is fairly obvious, and that is that there's a lot of dissatisfaction with the public education system. It's as simple as that. That's why we come back continuously year after year, as my friend from District 2 said, in the 3 years that we've been here, we've discussed school choice. In the many, many years that some of the others have been here, school choice has been an issue. Well, why are we dissatisfied? Well, the answer is that we have a problem with our education system because it is failing in many ways. When 60% of our students cannot function at grade level, when their math and education scores do not match their grade level, that is a failure. And if you are in agriculture and 60% of your crop was failing, you would do something about it. Now, if I were in the business of manufacturing widgets and I threw out 60% of my crop and I only had 40% success, and a salesman knocked on my door and he said, for 2/100ths of a cent, you can try something different to see if it works, I would jump all over that. And that's what we're doing today. We are spending a very small amount of money. We are asking to spend a very small amount of money, 2/100ths of a percent of the amount of money that we have allocated to the education system to try something different, to see if perhaps we can turn out a better educated student population. It's very simple. I don't see that there really is much of an issue here, that we can't get behind this and see if we can do something better for our constituents, for the people of Idaho who are not happy with what we're doing. I ask you for a green light on this.
For debate on the motion, good lady from District
6. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To debate the bill.
Lady has the floor.
Thank you. A couple things. Number one, I have been a champion for kids. Kids from early childhood to college. And before I really get into my debate on the issues, I just want to point out a couple of things. And when we are saying there's 17,000 private school kids, and you take that times 5,000, we are over $85 million. And that's, if every one of those kids apply, which I assume that they probably would, because I sure would, that doesn't leave any money for those numbers that we are already talking about, that in the means test at basically $95,000 that we earn. So I just want to point that out, that there's not a lot of room. And but back to really the points I want to make about the bill itself, because we've heard some flaws in this bill, and I'm going to point out, in my opinion, too, an area in which I think is extremely flawed, and that is when you look at pages 4, lines 6 through 10, that talks about submitting the engagement survey, and then on page 5, lines 3 through 19, that designs the fact that LSO, our legislative services folks, are given that responsibility. So not only are, we've said some of the areas that they could add into the survey, but it's like, how does that give a purpose to absolutely look and measure the standards of the learning under this bill? I see this as it lacks purpose, it lacks the standard for measuring, and obviously, we like surveys. Surveys can say that the parents like the teacher, the parents like the structure, and that's great, because that's what we want. We want the parents to be happy, but this is not giving us the accountability piece that we need to determine how are these children learning on a broader basis. It appears that when this redraft was done, that this got kind of thrown in at the last minute, just for the sake of existing. It seems like a survey is being put in there. There's no guidelines on, so should the State Tax Commission they don't even get a copy of the survey. And they're the ones that are administering this, who are not experts in education. And if you look, the survey goes to the governor, it goes to Rev and tax committees in both the House and the Senate, and to JFAC. There's no mention of anyone who has some education background, who has understanding. And I think that's a real problem. Is the survey going to analyze for trends? Is it going to give us an impact on what the future of the education should look like? There's basically no direction to LSO, folks. And when there's a fatal flaw in a bill, we say we need to go back to the drawing board, because we don't want to set forth legislation that's going to be left again to the courts for interpretation. We know what that has done in the past, and I see big holes in this area. This does require the parents to complete the survey, but if they don't complete the survey, they have no consequence to that, other than they aren't going to get money the next year, but maybe there should be the stick. Maybe they should say, you have to repay the money if you don't follow these rules. Is this going to track student progress, or is it simply going to track enrollment data? This will certainly give the state of Idaho an idea of which homeschool students are, in fact, pulling money out of the state, and we'll have a little bit of idea of how many those students are by this oversight. LSO monitoring this and putting this out is basically impractical, and it is not aligned with their mission. LSO's primary role is to support legislators, not to oversee tax policy, not to oversee education policy. And we know that as a body. We know that is not the responsibility that should be thrown to LSO. This does not give additional resources to our state tax commission or to LSO to actually implement this. And it's not going to be an easy task for them to implement. It will take a lot of time. It will take a lot of energies. And I think that we are asking and we are mandating something that we are not funding. So, folks, when there's no consequences, and we've heard this time and time again when there's been private rights of actions put into almost every bill. And if a bill doesn't have teeth, by golly, we shouldn't pass it because it's not going to do anything. Well, I believe that this portion of the bill is extremely flawed. It lacks purpose, it lacks oversight, it lacks enforcement, and impacts on the program evaluations. This adds bureaucracy, it's growing government, and I believe it lacks any real accountability. There are many fatal flaws in the bill, as you've seen from several of us who have stood up, and I appreciate that, because we are here to debate this bill, not to debate the merits of history and so on. We are debating what we're going to do if we're going to do the additional choice. And I do believe that Idaho has worked very hard to have choice. And I'm proud of that. I'm proud of that I've been part of that, to broaden the choice with our charter schools. We have magnet schools. We have all sorts of schools that do give choice. And I'm very proud of that. But for me, today is about looking specifically at this bill, and this bill has many holes in it that we stand to have challenges with later. So for the reasons that I have discussed in regards to this, and in regard to others that have shown you some of the other flaws in this bill, I think this bill needs to go back. It needs to have more direction, and that we need to find something that works for Idaho, and I don't believe this is it, so I will be voting no on this bill.
For debate on the motion, Gentleman 26.
Mr. Speaker, I hate not to go with the flow, but request a debate in brevity.
Brevity.
Yeah.
The gentleman has the floor to debate the bill.
I've had 2 hours to sit and rehearse my thoughts. I got them both here. No, first, my concern is on appeal of the criteria that are set out for people to apply to this, that it almost implies that the program's begging for more money and expansion. My concern is on appeal, that would be granted and the parameters of this expanded. The second concern is the way it's done to apply for it. It's all in who can fire off their tax returns first. If you've ever had a business and employees, there is a relationship between who has accountants e-file for you, and it goes through really quickly. People that have a little less money are doing their own taxes, and it takes them forever. It wouldn't be the first time somebody came back in April and needed some more information. So I'm a no.
For the debate on the motion, lady from 18.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To debate against the bill.
Lady has the floor.
And I think in the pile of dead trees on your desk somewhere, if I could direct you to a chart that I circulated earlier that's entitled How to Qualify for Taxpayer Dollars If You Are a : And having this visually laid out, I'm kind of a visual thinker, I found this pretty stunning. We've had some discussion about the accountability metrics on both sides of the ledger. But if you look at that left side, and I have to tell you, this was highly condensed. If we actually had all the standards we put on public schools, it would be the height of several phone books. So this was an incredibly distilled, boiled down version that I did to try to cram it onto one half of a page. But it's a lot. I mean, we have so many things on here. We require, physics, biology, civics tests, all this stuff. And I was just wondering, and you look at the right side, not a lot there. It says, try to include some English, math, science, and social studies. Doesn't say how much. Could be an hour a year. Maybe they'll have one day a year. They'll have, the one day where you talk about math and English and social sciences. That would comply with this bill from my reading. So there's almost nothing in terms of what we require on the right. So it really begs the question of, if it's such a great idea to have no accountability restrictions and no requirements about anything, why wouldn't we do that for our public schools? I mean, why not just, I've heard this saying, oh, well, we have accountability because if the parents decide to send their kids to a private school, then boom, that's accountability. Parents are happy, that's all the accountability we need. Well, why wouldn't we replace everything on the left with that? Why wouldn't we just wipe out giant mountains of code with a single sentence that just says, as long as mom is happy, everybody's happy? Which is certainly the slogan in my home. I hope it's the slogan in yours, but I don't know that it's a great slogan for how we should dispense with taxpayer dollars. But the reason we did this, and to be clear, everything on the left is stuff we did. I mean, I've been here in this room when we passed a lot of the bills that fleshed out this giant pile of stuff on the left, and we continue to do it. Every year we add 4 or 5 more things. They got to have the "In God We Trust," they got to do this, they got to put up flags, they got to teach cursive. We keep piling these things on the public schools. And why did we, the very conservative Idaho legislature, put on this giant list of things that public schools have to do to get our money? We did it because we're conservative. We did it because this is spending taxpayer dollars, and we want to be very conservative and accountable in how those taxpayer dollars are spent. Because, I heard earlier someone saying, oh, we're just giving people their own money back. We're not. Very, very few people in the state are actually earning enough money and paying enough in state taxes that they are paying enough to cover the $5,000 they would be getting back through this. We are talking about OPM, other people's money on this. The vast majority of money that goes into education, whether it's public schools or private schools, is coming from people who don't have kids in the public school system, in either education system. They're paying because of kind of a social construct, a social contract idea, which is that we need an educated populace to function. We need a citizenry that can read and add and knows what's in the Constitution and knows something about American government and knows the difference between Mark Twain and Winston Churchill. I mean, it's how we function. It's how we have people who can vote on an intelligent, informed basis. It's how we have people who can hold down the jobs and build our roads in our schools. We all benefit from this, which is why everybody pays into it. And it's why we have a stake in accountability for that. We're all saying, sure, I'll pay my money so that your kid can go to school, but I'd like some strings attached on that. It's not just free money. If I'm going to pay, happy to pay. We need that educated citizenry. But I would really like to know when I hand that check over that they are going to learn biology and chemistry and algebra and American government and American history, that school isn't going to be turning people away based on their disabilities or their religion or their race or anything else. I want to know that they're testing, that we actually have qualified teachers who've passed background tests and are certified and know what they're doing. We have a long list of things before we fork over those taxpayer dollars, and we should have that long list of things. Because we are playing with a lot of people's money, a lot of taxpayers' money that should not just be handed over, and this should not be a one-person accountability metric. Since when did we just say, recipient satisfaction is the only standard that we have on doling out government money? Where else would we ever do that in anything we do? I know we don't have a lot of Medicaid fans here, but let's just look at that scenario. Let's look at a disabled person on Medicaid who needs dialysis. Okay, now we say, okay, we'll pay for your dialysis. You go to a doctor who's certified, who fills out all the paperwork, shows that they know what they're doing, they have to be trained, and then we will pay for your dialysis because that's what you need to save your life. Well, why wouldn't that person just come in and say, you know what I think would be better for me is a trip to Hawaii. I think that would make me feel much better than dialysis. So if you could just pay for that, we would not do that. We would say, we'll give you money. It was for a specific purpose. It was to make sure that you get well.
The gentleman from 13.
We went for Medicaid to Hawaii, Mr. Speaker, and I don't think those are pertinent or in the bill. I'd like to be in Hawaii right now, but we need
All
to
of us
keep
would
it
like
to the
to be in
bill.
Hawaii.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would actually say it's
The good lady would like to be in
yes, Mr. Speaker. I think it's actually very pertinent because it addresses the question of what strings we put on government money, which is directly to this bill. And I'm going to tie it back here, Mr.
so
Speaker.
soon, because I'm having a hard
Yes,
time with Hawaii.
we don't do this. When we give people government money, it is for a very specific purpose, and we have accountability. We would never give a person in that scenario a check and say, aloha, enjoy. We would say, we want to make sure this is going to a certified doctor for the treatment that we have specified. And that's what we do with schools. We're giving them a check, essentially, we're paying for their kid to go, to know that they're going to learn this stuff. And it's going to be from qualified people, and they're going to be tested and reporting. So again, it's quite stunning to me that we would throw all that out the window on the right side of the equation. It just does not feel conservative at all to me. But I wanted to quickly address some of the other things I saw in here that I've heard in the course of the debate. I heard that it's means tested. I don't think it's means tested. In fact, I would be stunned if anybody of lower means were ever able to take advantage of this. There's a school down the street from me, $25,000 tuition. No poor person's going to be able to go there with a $5,000 check. When my kids were younger, for a while, I sent them to a private school that was $18,000. It's probably a lot more than that now. It was a very well-heeled crowd at that school. It was pretty much universally very wealthy people. If you cut each of those people a $5,000 check, it would still be very wealthy people going to that school. It's not like they would suddenly be able to open their doors to low-income people. They still wouldn't be able to afford it, basically $20,000 tuition, even with a little $5,000 kicker. So this is not opening the door. I feel that this 300% of federal poverty line thing, nobody's going to really be able to take advantage of that because you can't go to private school for $5,000 a year. There's almost none in the state that you can get into for $5,000. I think the mean in the state is more like $12,000, and in certain areas way higher than that. Another thing I heard was that, maybe we'll have better outcomes. We will never know because there's no testing or results reporting under this bill. So we will be sending some money into a black hole. We will have no idea if the kids who get this money are doing better or worse. In fact, if we look to other states, it indicated that they were doing worse. In one of the few states where they actually were able to measure anything, in Indiana, they found math scores actually dropped for those who were the recipients of these essentially voucher funds. Some other things I know there was talk about, some schools do accommodate people with disabilities. That's wonderful. I applaud that. But they don't have to. That's not one of the requirements of this bill. That would be fully voluntary. I was contacted by a constituent in my district who had to pull their kid out of a private school and send them to the local public school because their private school would not accommodate their kid's disability. I also heard this notion of, well, why shouldn't you get your money back if you didn't use it? If you didn't send your kid to public school, maybe you should get your money back. That's not how we work. I don't get money back for the taxes I paid to pave roads in parts of the state I don't drive on. If I don't go to my local park often enough, I don't get my money back for not going there. We are providing a service, a universal service with standards because we need an educated citizenry. So I hope you will give this your red light. I feel this is one of the least conservative bills I've ever seen presented to me in my 11 years here.
Is there further debate on the motion? Good gentleman, 27.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to debate the bill,
Has the floor debate.
and I will be speaking a little slower because I can't keep up with Representative Rubel. But I would like permission to read a few words.
The
From
gentleman
paper?
from the newspaper.
Yeah.
The gentleman has asked permission, unanimous consent to read from the newspaper. Is there an objection? Gentleman may read. Hearing none,
Okay.
the gentleman may read.
None of you probably read this article because it appeared in the 1940 something in the Minidoka County News, and it was the obituary of my great grandfather. Said he moved into the Big Bend area of Minidoka County in the early 1900s and later became a member of the school board. He was in the Big Bend School District where they paid their teachers $55 a month, but they can only pay them for 4 months of the year. And the neighboring district was able to pay $95 a month for their school teacher, and she stayed 8 months. And he was upset that there wasn't a balance of opportunities to be educated. So now I read, in 1934, he was elected to the House of Representatives and set out to attain his dream of better education through legislation. That's is that possible? Anyway. A bill was passed by both houses to appropriate money from the general fund to be distributed among the poor districts, but was vetoed by the governor. In 1937, his bill met the same fate. But in 1939, the school equalization bill became law. For the first time in the history of public schools, public school had become part of the state education budget. So I think the equality that was achieved in the early days through the passage of this bill is the same thing that we measure today. Now, when we talk about measuring things, I've watched the news and I can't wait for the day when the federal government gets rid of the Department of Education. What will that mean for us? Well, I can show you one thing that it means, and I'll try and belt out because I'm going to use both hands.
Good gentlemen, you can't use props.
Okay.
Sorry. That's good.
Now, I have no props.
I should have the chief clerk call you out, but we'll let you get away with it.
Okay, there are pages and pages of rules and regulations that we've...
You guys tell he's my cousin.
Well, he remembers I babysat him, and he was an ornery little cuss back then, too. So there's pages and pages of regulations that we heap on the public schools. And I think Representative Rubel's explained really well why we do that. But what I want to do, and this is just Clay's dream, like my great-grandfather, I'm a dreamer, I want to see what the federal government does with schools, and then I want to do some of the same things in the state of Idaho. And I would like to do these so at some point in time when people want to make a choice, that we won't build up a whole system of things that we can't support, because the better choice will be public schools, because we have less regulations, we have more people teaching and helping people instead of filling out reams and reams of paper. I'm totally opposed to doing this change right now, and I'm totally for making big changes in our public education when we get the opportunity. Thank you, and I'll sit down and gather up my props.
Further debate. Good gentleman, 31.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wish to debate the bill.
Gentleman has the floor to debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I choose to be a supporter of parental choice. I have asked the question repeatedly in this building the last month, what can I do to help remove roadblocks to parental choice? And apparently this piece of legislation indicates that a roadblock, and maybe a major roadblock, is funding. And I will tell the gentleman from 22 and the gentleman from 13, I feel like King Agrippa, you almost converted me. But the key word is almost. There's some things that I'm very concerned about as this bill, the way it's written. And I'd like to start with the fiscal note. I am not convinced that the Tax Commission is equipped currently to account for the funds that are going for this purpose. When asked in committee whether it was confirmed that they felt comfortable, the suggestion was made that conversations are ongoing and that the fiscal note may be amended. Well, we're voting on the fiscal note as it stands today. Here it is, and we must vote on it as it is. There are vacancies, obviously, in the Tax Commission. I do not want vacancies overseeing this program. I don't want a ghost telling us whether or not the money's accounted for properly. I'm very concerned about the mixed message that we're sending to our constituents. We're saying here is funding for the purposes of education. We're not going to define what that means, or at least we're going to define it very loosely because we believe that you know what is best. Yet, if you misuse it, you're going to be subject to audit and penalties, including perhaps felony penalties. The reason for that is because we're not just giving back their money, we're giving other people's money along with it. If we truly believe that people should have the choice to do as they chose, then why don't we take this $50 million and piggyback it to the $253 million that this body overwhelmingly supported? Would that not be a better option? The way this bill is written, the $50 million is outside of the appropriations process. I remember about 15 years ago having a very candid conversation with our county sheriff. I was serving as a county commissioner, and his vehicles, his patrol vehicles, were out of date and had way too many miles on them. This was right after the last Great Recession, and we were actually concerned that some of his vehicles wouldn't be able to respond to an emergency. And yet we had no choice. We had to run them another year because we did not have the funding that was needed. Because this program is outside of the appropriations process, should there be another economic downturn, every Idahoan will live with the consequences of that downturn, except this program will glide on autopilot. We need to think seriously about that. Ladies and gentlemen, we all understand, I hope, our constitutional obligation to fund public education. Funding requires revenue. The way this bill is written, this is a $50 million tax shift. It's a $50 million tax shift. Ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, I remember many, many years ago, my wife and I had a small family, a young family. We weren't very small. We have 6 children. We had a young family. I came home from work one evening, and my wife had been to parent-teacher conference, and she had brought home with her some papers. And as we discussed what was on those papers, it was applications for government subsidies for our kids. Because of our household income, because of the number of children we had in school, we qualified for several subsidies. I was young, I was dumb, and fiercely independent. And after discussing this with my wife, those papers ended up in the fireplace. And yet today we are discussing the possibility of paying parents to drive their children to school or to swimming lessons or perhaps a dance recital. I'm wondering, ladies and gentlemen, if I was born in the wrong generation. With that, I'm a solid red on this bill, so thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Good lady from 34.
To debate the bill, Mr. Speaker.
Lady has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Folks, I know we've been here a while, so I will be respectful of everyone's time. We all come to this building with specific goals. That's why we're here. We told our constituents that we would come here and we would do the things that we promised them we would do. And yet sometimes in the pursuit of the goals, we forget to weigh the trade-offs of what we're willing to set aside to achieve the objective. And in this instance, House Bill 93 sets aside some critical things that we have identified as priorities for us as legislators in Idaho. I speak specifically about what it means for a child to expect to walk into the door of a school and to be treated fairly and with respect. Under Idaho law, the private schools get to have their own enrollment process. They get to determine who is allowed to register. They get to determine the curriculum. These are all good things that I am 100% supportive of. Private schools are private for a reason, and they have the right to determine what their curriculum is and how they function as an institution. But once they begin to accept students who have received tax credits, I begin to wonder what kind of example we're setting when we demand that our students in public school not be treated poorly for their views, that they be respected, that their faith be respected. I look at the situation in front of us and I respect all of you here today, whatever position you may hold. But at the end of the day, we have an obligation to ensure that a child feels like they can go somewhere and that they can be themselves in an environment that is safe for them. As some of you may have seen, there's a letter that got passed around with my name on it about a mom who was seeking out an alternative for her family. She went to a local school that just in this instance happened to be one of the religious private schools. She wanted her kids to be in an environment where they could have religious instruction. But when the school discovered that they did not share the same denomination as the school in question, she was told she needed to go somewhere else. This was a mom who specifically said, I want my child to have access to Bible instruction in class. I'm okay with that. I am okay with my child following the rules of your school. But because that child and that family did not share the faith of that school, they were turned away. Again, the school has the right to do that. But once we start sending out public taxpayer dollars, and it's in connection with people attending private schools, I think we have to raise our standard for what is acceptable when it comes to discrimination in these circumstances. Finally, the last thing I want to point out to you is in section 19, which is towards the end of the bill. And you'll note that it says, and makes reference to something called parental placement. So this references back to special education. When a child has a parental placement under an individual education plan, what that means is that the parent is opting out of the system that ensures they have free access to the services that come with special education. Now, this is a provision that's in the bill, clear as day, right? It's visible for anyone who reads it. But I'd be curious to know how many parents realize that when they accept the credit for their special ed child, that they are also opting out of the right to receive services from public schools. I also think it's worth noting that, again, through a lack of resources on the part of private schools because of the complexity, the private schools are often relying on the public schools to help them with their evaluations, to help them with their testing, to reach the point of understanding how to best serve the child. And the stories I've heard about the children who have high needs, they need a one-on-one assistant to provide support to them. How is that replicable in a smaller system that can't spread those expenses across the district or the state as a whole? It's not the fault of the private school that they don't have those resources. The reality is there are high needs kids and they need access to the services that are in the public schools. What I'll leave you here with today is this. We are facing a choice about whether or not we as a body that have debated previously the notion of, do we support the redistribution of wealth? If you support the redistribution of wealth through government subsidies of $50 million, House Bill 93 is for you. If you want to advance a serious discussion about how to provide a better education for Idaho students, I encourage your red light on this bill. Thank you.
Further debate on the motion? Good gentleman, 22.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To debate the bill.
Gentleman has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have way too many notes, as everybody's been talking, of course, and we all like to take notes and find out what information maybe you have a difference of opinion on, or what is possibly inaccurate, and go through those things. And I'll try to leave something for the good lady who's going to close on this without wasting your time nor hers. One of the concerns we hear about is this isn't going to be helpful for rural schools because they don't have private school options. They don't have those options oftentimes because the parents are happy with their schools. They do a great job there. Parents don't necessarily want or need another choice there. But, I say but, there is something besides private school options. There are micropods. There are small schools. Those things will be available if you have rural schools that are maybe not doing as well, or the parents aren't as satisfied. Those can happen without building new schools. So we can take care of that. We heard that there wasn't the resources or expertise for kids that have exceptional needs. Well, there will be if there's some additional funding that can follow those kids somewhere. Good lady from 19, I wish every parent was like you, who scraped and saved and did whatever you had to do for your child. Not everybody can do that. Not everybody has the ability to be able to do that. Sometimes a single parent with kids doesn't have the ability to homeschool, nor do they have the resources to send them to a different private school. The choice option is not available to them. It is available to some, but we want to make sure it's available to all. I heard a lot about background checks, especially in committee, a little bit here today about the security of teachers that may be teaching kids in these environments. I looked up some statistics nationwide. Holy cow, you want to be scared about cases of lewd conduct with minors? It's not hard to find it in the school system, and all of those individuals had background checks. I'm not saying that they're not effective or we don't need them, but I'm telling you, it doesn't always work. In CUNA here, within a few year period of time, at the exact same school, we had 2 cases where individuals were arrested because of that. I have faith in my parents to screen who's going to be teaching their children. We heard about funding, this prohibition against double dipping. It's in the bill. You can't double dip. You can't get the same money for the same services. Remember, this bill is about refunding expenses. It's not a $5,000 check. I'm going to pull my kid out of school. Here's your $5,000. My kid wants some advanced opportunities. Here's your $2,500. My kid wants some empowering parents. Well, here's your money for it. It doesn't work that way. The bill is set up to reimburse you for your expenses. That's the difference. If you have no expenses, you have no reimbursement. There's nothing that you get from it, regardless of your poverty level or not poverty level. So I think that's very important to understand. This is about verifiable expenses that people would be reimbursed for. There was a question, I just need to point this out here in about returning money. There was a concern that what if they pulled their kid, they got the money and they didn't have to return it because they, for one reason or another, page 5, line 28, if a student ceases to qualify as an eligible student or has already received the money, shall be repaid. That's in the bill. It is there. We've made sure that you can't take care of that. Concern about growing government. I heard that a lot about growing government. I didn't quite hear nearly the complaints about our launch program a couple years ago that put 12 FTP, what we're spending on that one right now, but I never heard those complaints at that time. Mr. Speaker, could I have permission to read a quote from past President Ronald Reagan, a very short one, and from our current president?
Unanimous consent has been requested to read quotes from 2 presidents. Is there objection? Hearing none, the good gentleman may read.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is from President Ronald Reagan. It says, "Our leaders must remember that education does not begin with some isolated bureaucrat in Washington. It does not begin with state or local officials. Education begins in the home, where it is a parental right and a responsibility. I may just add, it also ends with the parent as well. Ultimately, they're the ones who have to respond to that. Mr. Speaker, and then the one from President Trump here says, parents want and deserve the best education for their children, but too many children do not thrive in the assigned government-run K through 12 school. It is the policy of my administration to support parents in choosing and directing the upbringing and education of their children. If the president's latest executive order is like anything else, it will be held up in courts for years and years, because that's what we do when we don't like something. We sue and we hold it up. I'm not willing to wait to find out if that program is able to come down to the states. If we're waiting for that, I think we're going to be waiting a long time, Mr. Speaker, for that to actually happen. I'm almost done, Mr. Speaker. I got just a couple ones I really need to touch on. Accountability. We talk about it not being the same as what's in the public school system, that we have all these accountability measures. Well, good. That's okay. This is something different. So if we're trying something different, you don't repeat what you've already done. I would say, though, if we really wanted to free up those public schools, which I would love to do, then you know what we do? We take all the money we're giving them, we hand them to the parent or the kid, and we say, do whatever you want with that $10,000. I'd love to have the money follow the kid, and they can pick wherever they want. I would love to do that, but that's not what we're doing today. We're just trying something a little bit different with that. The tax commission, as far as whether or not they're going to be able to account for $50 million program, if they can't, we're in trouble. They get billions of dollars, and if they can't account for a $50 million program, then we're in trouble. We met with the tax commission. We worked with the tax commission. We talked about what resources do you need to administer this program, and they told us. We said, you only need $125,000 for a new program? Yep, that's all we need, and some FTP. Well, they have unfilled FTPs right now. They can fill those positions to staff what they need. Speaking of fiscal notes, Mr. Speaker, I wasn't sure if I have to ask permission to read our rules, but I'm going to ask permission to read from our rules there.
I don't think it's necessary, but unanimous consent has been requested. The gentleman can read.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is just so everybody knows here on, if I can find that one again. It's joint rule number 18 and rule number 18. It's going to take me a second. I should have highlighted it, but this was Josh's book, so I couldn't do that. Where it says we do not vote on statements of purpose. That's what we don't do, and I'm trying to find it again. It's on the right page here, but now I'm going to have to read everything against with that. Fiscal notes, they only apply to the bills, debate, revised. Oh, there it is. Sorry. Statements of purpose and fiscal notes are mere attachments to the bill and not voted on. We don't vote on a fiscal note. Fiscal notes are just something we try to help people understand what that bill is. If you think that fiscal note is wrong, you can debate it and you can say, I think it's wrong, but we don't vote on the bill. That's not part of the bill. So we don't want to necessarily confuse ourselves that is a problem and then therefore a reason necessarily to vote on it. Last thing I'd like to tell you about, Mr. Speaker, and many of you know my situation, and I'm sorry I have to repeat this again. Some of you are new and you may not know about me or my family, and so I want to make sure you understand why I'm so passionate about this. And before I go any further down this road, this is not a repudiation of public schools. Public schools do a fantastic job. I have 8 children. 4 of them graduated, married, done the whole thing. Those 4 all went on to college. 2 of them became attorneys. Am I proud? Yes, I'm proud of my kids, and we all are, and I'm really proud of those kids. One was a valedictorian. These guys went to college on scholarships. They're just brilliant kids. Really did a good job. They thrived. They tried the public school system, and that's what worked for them. We had some that did magnet schools. That's what worked for them. Some of them did some charter schools. All of those public school options, we worked with them, and they were fantastic. I loved them. They were great. Teachers to this day that we talk about and say how wonderful a job they've done. I have 4 other children, and these are adopted children. They all have special needs. And we started them in public school. One of them didn't work out, so we moved them to a different public school. That didn't really work out, so we found another public school. We moved to charter schools. We tried them there. Those did not work out either. Some of them they did. Some of them done great. I've got a couple of them that have already graduated and from the public school system, but I have a couple that it didn't quite work out as well, and I have one in particular. After trying all of those options, what we found was a pod. And that's nothing more than a family friend of ours that had similar concerns with some of their kids, that it wasn't working out for them. So they hired an individual. They came and taught about 4 families. Started off about a dozen kids there. And that's what's working. That's what's worked for my kid. Now for me, I was able to pay for that. But not everybody can. Why should I have that advantage when other people can't? The bill has mechanisms in there. If you make less than 300, it says less than 300%. We talk about, they're 90. Well, that's also 89,000, 88,000, 87,000, 80,000, 50,000, 40,000. All of those individuals have priority to get these benefits. They are the ones who are going to receive this benefit first. If there's anything left over, it can go after that. That's what those benefits are for. I think that people should have the same chances that I had with my children. Mr. Speaker, I know this isn't a perfect bill. We've never done a perfect bill. I've been here for 13 years and we're still working on the perfect bill. But this is a pretty dang good bill, Mr. Speaker. And I would encourage your green light, and I hope you can support me.
Thank you, gentlemen. Further debate on the motion? I was going to tell you that my bills are perfect, but I didn't go there. Hearing none, would the good lady of 32 care to close the debate?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In response to debate, I would just like to point out that this bill does not send one dime to a private school. This bill sends money to families to make choices for their children where they believe they will experience the best learning environment. If I thought for 1 minute that this bill would harm public schools or children, I would not be standing here with it. The academic evidence is clear, and it is empirical, that school choice is a rising tide that lifts all boats. Support for school choice, therefore, is a vote for improving our public schools, because the academic evidence is clear in states where this has happened that that's what happens. This is not an either-or choice. This is a both-and, as was pointed out by several people. It's just one more piece of the pie for whatever reason. Maybe it's bullying, maybe it's academic instruction, maybe it's disability. You're looking for a different setting. I'm not going to take the time to refer to the letter, but there is a letter from a parent of a special needs child who runs a school exclusively for students with disabilities that I would encourage you to read. I will say this, that I want to say it correctly here. A friend of mine actually is a parent of an autistic child, and he points out that private schools aren't bound by the same rules and regulations and processes as public schools, and that's precisely the point. We have some heroic special education teachers out there who do amazing work, and that works for the vast majority of children. For those few for whom it does not work, those of low means in particular, this bill is an opportunity for those children to thrive. I would say that I would dispute that our legislative services staff does not have education expertise. They write the education laws. They write the education budgets. I would debate that they know those laws and the finances better than any of us here in this room. So I think they are perfectly capable of devising a survey that's similar to the one that happens for public schools right now, and whose guidelines do exist on page 5 of the bill, section 14. I invite you to read those. We are not asking our auditors to be experts in education policy. We're asking them to be experts in auditing, which they are. As has been pointed out, we all want to keep our kids safe, and a teacher certification is no guarantee that an adult will not behave badly. And the existing vetting processes that private schools have, micro schools have, will continue to exist under this bill. This bill does not interrupt those existing policies and processes. In terms of accountability, I would point out to you that almost 100% of Idaho teachers pass their teacher evaluation, but not 100% of our children can read. It's a significantly lower percentage. And this bill gives those families of lower means especially the opportunity to get their child into a school where they have a fighting chance at learning how to read at grade level. Mr. Speaker, in closing, I spoke to a group of school children in December, and we had a conversation about why I ran and all of that. And at one point, a third grader asked me, "Why do you love children so much?" And I said, "You're our future. You are the hope for our future. And in 30 or 40 years, it's going to be one of you standing here talking. And I want to help you be prepared for that." But let me give you the answer for adults. The answer for adults is this: some of our children are dealt a bad hand in life. And through no fault of their own, the adults in their lives have made difficult choices. I sat next to one on a field trip once. I'm going to call him Billy. And he shared with me, he was a fourth grader at the time. He's a foster child who you will see added to this bill this year as a new feature. He told me how, as a kindergartner, he prepared food for his two younger siblings when his single mom was not home for extended periods of time, a whole weekend. I spent an hour talking to that little boy, and I have never forgotten him. I want him to have the opportunity that the good lady from 19 talked about. Every child matters, no matter where they're learning, and parents are best suited to make that decision. This bill gives families of lower resources that opportunity, and I would ask for your your green light. Sorry. I would ask for your green light. And Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the members of this body for the experiences and expertise on both sides of this issue that you have been willing to share. It is a privilege to serve with you, and I again ask for your green light. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, good lady. Debate is closed. Question is, shall House Bill 93 pass the House? The clerk will unlock the machine and the members will cast their votes. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Clerk will lock the machine and record the vote and report the pairs.
Palmer votes aye. Kasner votes nay. Harris votes aye. Galaviz votes nay. Crane 12 votes aye. Mathias votes nay.
42 ayes, 28 nays, the majority having voted in favor of House Bill 93. House Bill 93 is passed to House. Is there correction to title?
No correction to title.
Hearing none, the title is approved. The bill will be transmitted to the Senate.